as a game designer, this is a common misconception that your job is to come up with ideas. But in fact, our job is to make other people's ideas work. If you want to go into the games industry, you gotta make games. It's 40 degrees outside, but it must have been 50 where we're doing this thing. So if we invested a lot of time in it, but it's not working for the benefit of the game, that thing has to go. Inspiration always comes from personal experience.
So first, I wanted to learn a bit about your personal experience working in different countries. How, in the first place, so first thing would be, how did you get into game dev, and can you describe the start of your professional life?
Yeah, so like, making games is something I've always wanted to do since I was a kid. So like, you know, ever since I played Space Invaders, I was completely infatuated with that world. In fact, I remember they were asking us when we were in kindergarten, like the kids, what we wanted to do when we grow up. And my parents, they're hoarders, they never throw away anything, so they still have that piece of paper. And all the other kids in class, they wanted to be, you know, astronauts and pilots and that kind of stuff. And I said I wanted to make games in Japan. So like I knew what I wanted to do ever since I was like a very young kid. I think the first time I discovered what game design actually means was I used to finish games and then I would write strategy guides for those games on my school notebooks. And then I will give those, so I'll make write an entire walkthrough on my school notebook, and then I give it to the other kids in class to kind of help them finish the games. And I think I was writing, it was maybe around 96 when I was like writing the strategy guide for the first Resident Evil.
Yeah.
And I was tracing the mansion, like drawing maps on my notebooks. I was like, you know, playing and writing down what I'm seeing. And then it hit me that somebody actually drew this from their imagination. So it wasn't like me tracing it. Somebody's actually imagined this and then put it on paper and then they made it a reality. And I was like, this is what game design is. And I definitely want to do that. So I think at the early start in college, me and a group of friends, we were studying Japanese together as a hobby, and we were all talking about how we want to make games. That was in Jordan, where I'm from.
Yeah.
There wasn't any game dev schools or anything like that. There wasn't any game development happening in the Middle East really at that time. So me and those guys, there was like 9 people. We're like, all right, we want to make a game, and we wanted to make a game on the Game Boy Advance. So we basically rented a small, tiny space. I think it was like 30 or 40 square meters. And we brought in like furniture from home. You know, those plastic chairs and tables that usually people put in the backyards and stuff. So we got a bunch of those, and we brought our computers from home, like Pentium 1 and Pentium 2 computers at the time. And we brought everything in, and it was 10 people on 4 computers in a very tiny space above a baker shop as well. So like underneath us, there was a baker store. So it was a furnace right underneath us. It's 40 degrees outside, but it must have been 50 where we're doing this thing. It was very cheap to rent that place for obvious reasons. And yeah, we just started to make a game. We started to make a platformer for the Game Boy Advance. Most of us were studying computer science at the time. I was studying computer science, but I was also had music as a hobby.
Yeah.
So I was writing the music for the game as well as like writing it in code.
Okay.
Yeah, that annoyed a lot of people because we didn't exactly have a music room and any isolation. So people tried to focus, and I would like go like bee, 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 the entire day. Yeah, it was a very tiny demo that we put together at the time. So another thing that was really difficult is that the Game Boy Advance, we did not have any access to dev kits. So what we did is that we had our own commercial unit. So we hacked those to make the games. And the game we made was a gigantic 2 megabyte game, of which I had 300 kilobytes for the sound and the music.
So that's how you started.
That's how I started. It's completely like indie before indie was a thing, I guess.
And you've also
I started as like, you know, programming and doing music, but
Yeah.
the guys in my team was telling me, you're such a wise ass all the time talking about how things should be. Why don't you also design the game? Because we're too busy building it.
So you
Yeah,
did.
I've been a game designer since. Haven't done anything else. 17 years now.
So you've worked both in Jordan, in Japan, and in Western companies in game dev.
Yeah. I think it's around 6, 7 countries so far.
Yeah, and there's New Zealand, and
Yeah.
could you tell us, is there any like major differences in the way game dev works in different parts of the globe, or all the people in game dev are kind of the same?
There's a lot of things in common, a lot of things differently. There's a talk I actually do quite frequently in conferences in which I talk about the different in management styles because I was a manager of design teams in the Middle East, the West, and the Far East. And there are huge differences in how things manage, but there's also a lot of similarities. So, like, people infatuation with games and how passionate they are about the medium and how they devour pop culture. This is unanimous across every game developer. So like, and this is what I like about going to like game development conferences. Like you walk in, there's people from all over the world. They all have everything in common, almost like like they all love games. They all love to make them. They have games that influenced their lives as they were growing up. Almost everybody unanimously were inspired by games to some extent when they were growing up, and they started to make games because they wanted to inspire others as well. That I found to be universal, like cross-cultural.
Is there any
Uh,
like key difference in the way?
I think that the biggest differences is like how the work culture and organizational happens. So like in the Middle Eastern companies, the management style is a little bit more traditional in how autocratic it is, very hierarchical, and the management style is more about leadership, enforcing or like instilling strong visions and then trickling it down. The manager needs to be this expert that has all the answers all the time, and people come to them for the guidance. um, in Japan, it's quite different. There's a culture of harmony in which people need to like come together in their decision making. There's a huge respect for people to be able to do their jobs in the proper way. The game director has a lot of respect and obedience that comes from the game teams. There's also like in general in Japan, there's a culture of loyalty to the company. So most people, they spend their entire career in the same company, and they dedicate their lives and resources to make sure that the company is always doing the best in terms of competitive edge. And well, like overwork, or it's a very common thing in the
Yeah.
games industry everywhere. In Japan, it's part of the culture, not just in the games industry. And a lot of things, like there's a lot of people that see their calling in life is to do a lot of work. In Europe, I found it, and in New Zealand and like Western countries in general, there's a lot more. There's regional differences. So like the German management style is quite different than the Swedish management style is quite different than the New Zealand style. But in general, there's a lot of uh, how do I say this? There's a lot of trust in the teams to be able to perform their jobs the best they can. They apply a lot more agile methodologies in their way of thinking. In general, the management style resembles a lot theory Y when it comes to like management motivational theories and all of that. So yeah, like I could talk about this for hours.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure you mentioned you had a lot more
May,
questions, so I'm not sure how
may,
much more I could go with
maybe
this.
we'll put the link to your talks if they're available somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, that would be good.
um, I wanted to ask something about like games, particularly in the MENA region,
Hmm.
not particularly in Jordan, but any countries in the region. So what I wanted to ask is, for example, if we talk about game companies in post-Soviet region, a
Yeah.
lot of them incorporated that aesthetic into their
Hmm.
games. I'm thinking about Stalker, I'm thinking about
Yeah.
Metro,
Good games.
even indie titles. Like recently there was this game called It's Winter, and it's
Yeah.
just about the anxiety of living in this Soviet apartment buildings and just going
Hmm.
outside. All you can do is just walk around winter and look at the stores, and that's it.
Yeah.
Do you think we'll see some games that will kind of incorporate that local aesthetic and atmosphere from the MENA region games, like from Arab countries, maybe from Africa?
Yeah, I mean, like so far from the Middle East, a lot of the games that are coming out that are developed over there, they're very much inspired with the local culture. So you see a lot of games are coming out that have perhaps desert environments, a lot of like Bedouin culture kind of showing up within it, or like they dig deeper into some of the local history to bring out a part of that. There's a game that was released on PS4, I think, is called Unearthed. That was also like based on a lot of Middle Eastern cultures and the kind of thing. And I think that's great because that's the unique voice that these regions can bring to the gaming scene. Because like
Yeah,
the Japanese gaming industry has been very strong in relying a lot on the Japanese culture and exporting that to the world. Like with concepts like ninjas and samurais and that kind of stuff. Like people that were able to, and sometimes it can get much deeper, obviously. And people were able around the world to be inspired and related to it. We've seen similar things in the West as well with games inspired by locations and areas around the world. I think. The game development in the Middle East now is definitely on the rise, but it's still in its very early stages. We are yet to see like big budget or like global hits to come out of the region in a way that they'll help to export a lot of this knowledge. But
yeah,
for me, that's only a matter of time. It's all about the teams kind of getting that experience and rallying together around concept, and then eventually getting the funding to be able to ship some of those projects all the way to completion. So it's a matter of time before it happens. Like uh, Poland, like exported their pop culture now to the world, right?
yeah,
Some of the like their novels and the characters, and now it's become commonplace. Um, with a lot of like super strong IPs and game development that are inspired by a lot of their locales. So all it takes is like a team or two to persevere and get the funding and like nail that formula, and hopefully you'll see a lot more of that coming soon.
yeah. One hit, and everybody will kind of focus on that market and see, oh, there are game dev teams here. We,
There's game dev teams there. It always starts like off like this. Like there's this game that rallies like pretty much all the passionate people in the region,
yeah,
and then they form a studio together. And then, if they're lucky enough, that studio creates the hit. Then that studio grows, becomes a giant studio. Then people leave that studio to start their own indie studios, and then those indie studios become successful. They grow, and then like it creates an ecosystem. It's how it happens everywhere.
yeah.
I guess Poland is just the most recent example that I thought of, but there's this. It's yeah, it is how it works, and
So
we
you
just
think it's around the corner somewhere?
it has to be. It has to be. I think we're arriving
Good to
at that
know.
that critical mass in which like there are now successful companies that are making some revenue.
Yeah,
There are games. There are publishing endeavors that are bringing games from outside that are becoming successful. Bigger publishers are now looking into localization into Arabic for a lot of the big games. To
that is
for the
true.
Middle Eastern region, so there is consumerism that's going on over there. So it's only a matter of time before, like, a development team strikes gold.
Also, on the similar subject, you wrote a book on game design in Arabic.
I did, yes.
What is it
I,
about generally? Like, is it all you have to know as a game designer, but now it's available in Arabic, so if you don't speak
yeah,
English, you can finally read it? Or is it
it
something?
is. It is pretty much that. I released this book 2 years ago. It's a textbook, so it's around 400 pages. It's basically game design one-on-one from my perspective. It's basically, if you've never learned anything about game design before, it's for you to provide you with this way of thinking um, in Arabic, because this book, like this knowledge never existed in Arabic before. It was always you had to learn another language to get this
Yeah,
information. It's what I had to do basically. Like luckily I spoke English. I was fortunate enough to get that level of education, and I ended up importing books about game design back when I still don't know what I'm doing, I guess. But back then maybe I didn't know what I was doing at all, and I just needed a lot of information, like wherever I can get it, to just check with myself. Am I doing the right thing here? Am I on the right track? Anything was good. So I just wanted to pay it forward for other people that are like in my shoes right now, trying to start off to kind of get some information, get their foot in the door, so to speak. So like even
But
like I
what's it
wrote a
called?
chapter around how to get a job in the industry and like how I did it and the many different ways that you can do it. It's called الخلاب في فن تصميم الألعاب, which translates to Al-Khalab in the art of game design. So the old medieval century books in Arabic, they used to always rhyme.
Yeah,
So and they have a naming formula in which like you start off with an adjective. It's usually a hyperbolic adjective. It's like the complete in the art of medicine, or the clarity in
yeah.
Arabic grammar. Those like this how, but this is how they used to be named. They used to use this kind of format, and they rhymed. So I wanted to give like an homage to this. So I named my book "The Splendid in the Art of Game Design."
Okay.
Uh,
I
so
now want to speak Arabic to try and read it.
not blowing my own horn at all. It's not splendid by any stretch of the imagination. But it's just because that word rhymes really well with the
Yeah.
Arabic word for games, and people that speak Arabic they always think it's either a funny joke or a dad joke, depending on like your sense of humor, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a dad, then it is funny. So, still related to education and developing studios, I wanted to ask something about, like movies, the film industry, the first movies, they
Mm,
started in 1890. And the
yeah.
first film school in the world was opened, it was founded in 1990, only like 30 years after. the
Wow.
game the gaming industry exists for more than 50 years, I think, and there are
Hmm.
still, to my knowledge, no, like major designated game schools. There are different faculties where you can learn how to do game design. Different universities open their the different faculties, but there is no like a place to go if you want to make games.
I
Why
think that's
so?
changing. I think that's changing actually. So like overall my career as I traveled around the world, I did see a bit of that at first when I, like there'll be design or game design faculties as part of like design studies in
Yeah,
general. But then I've also started seeing dedicated game development schools popping up. I've taught in a bunch of them actually over the years. So there's like media design school in New Zealand. There's the Berlin Games Academy. I used to teach there sometimes. And now here in Stockholm, there's the Future Games, which I just finished a course over there last week. So there are now dedicated game development schools that focuses on like teaching you a lot on how to make games,
yeah,
and they bring in people from the industry experience to kind of translate that experience back to the students. And most importantly, a lot of those schools they have very strong connections with game development companies. So in this job and my previous jobs, we used to rely on the game development schools to hire interns and a lot of people or junior developers, and a lot of people like got their foot through the door through these schools. So actually now they're a very viable way to get into game development. There are
yeah,
some really strong schools out there that teach a lot of things. In fact, I actually sometimes when I like teach these students, because these students they sometimes is 2 to 3 year programs, and in those programs they study development, design, and some schools include art as well. So like a graduate from these schools, they come out, they know Unreal or Unity or both, and they've taken game design courses, and they've worked in teams and produced at least 4 game projects.
yeah.
So I'm like, these guys are graduating way better than I ever was when I first started. They have like more knowledge, like they're much more prepared to be part of the industry than I was, because I was just a stumbling buffoon at the time, like really trying to figure out what's going on and making a lot of mistakes. And these guys are coming out armed with a lot of knowledge. So I think we're definitely getting there. Um, there are very strong schools coming out, and there will be other schools to come. I think the tricky part is that for the games industry to be able to provide enough entry job opportunities
Yeah.
to match the number of students that are coming in. That's probably the interesting challenge that we have to face as an industry.
A counterpoint then, do you think we'll need people to go to gaming schools in the future, like in 10 years when it's more established and it's everywhere, and it's like,
Hmm.
what do I do? Maybe I should go to a game school. Do you really, considering that back in the days, all the developers were self-taught.
Hmm.
Do you think would it still be a viable option in the future?
I think it really gives you a bigger shortcut. It's because all the developers back in the day were self-taught. It was very difficult to break into the industry, so very few people go in. And like every time you speak to somebody about how they got into the industry right now, they have a very interesting story about how they they did something that ended up with something else, or a huge coincidence, or like somebody knew somebody. It's never like a straightforward case of like I was qualified and I applied and I got the job. It was almost never that.
Yeah.
Um, and it's because game development it requires a very specific set of skills, very niche set of skills. So you could be a good programmer, but you're not necessarily a good rendering programmer. You know what I mean? Or you could be like a very good engineer, but not necessarily a good physics engineer.
Yeah.
So like in game development, there's a lot of like deep specifications, and the only way for you to know them is by doing them. My profession, game design, for example, I could probably get 5 people in the room and they'll have different ideas about what game design is, or like what kind of qualifications you need, or like how you properly spot a good game designer.
Yeah.
And with these kind of expertise, like without a school that actually trains you to get that level experience, would really help you get your foot in the door.
Yeah, and maybe when you know the professor and they actually work in the company,
Yeah,
kind of
that
helps.
helps as
Yeah.
well. But like most
Yeah.
of the time, like I said, the school, most companies now, they have internship programs, and they
Yeah.
have people responsible of the internship programs, and the internship person would be dealing directly with the school. So like we have that at Dyson, which we get interns from schools regularly.
Yeah.
We used to have a very strong internship program at King. I think it's still running. Um, in which like we communicate with most of the game dev schools, I think in Europe, if not in other locations, and we used to get interns on an annual basis. So yeah, there's definitely strong internship teams to get people into the industry, and those schools really help out.
That is good.
Yeah.
I don't know like what to add here.
Yeah, back in the day, we used to like have to fish for people. We'd be like,
Yeah.
"There's this person on this forum that seems to be really interesting in this very tiny section of our game. Maybe we could bring them in." Or
Yeah.
like, there's this person in QA that's been, showing up a lot more often and like contributing with ideas. Maybe we should have him sit or her sit with the designers a lot more frequently and see what happens. Like,
Yeah.
it used to be that. It wasn't like a systematic approach. It is still that to some extent, but the schools and the education are really like pushing forward in like making this better.
So if you're a young, like a young person that is willing to go into and get into game dev, you should look for
Yeah.
game schools.
It's one
They'll
of the
help.
things. It's one of the things I really recommend. So if you want to like if you want to, if you're interested in game development and you want to study something, the thing I would recommend is that definitely go with computer science. It always helps. And if everything fails, hey, you're a programmer, you can get a job anywhere. So like you get like all your bases covered. Um, and it's a job that's is in demand and probably will be in demand for quite some time. So that's probably the safest measure. But in general, if you want to go into the games industry, you gotta make games. Whether you make games on your own, you make games within an online team, you do game jams, you do mods, you do games within a school environment.
Yeah.
The only way if you get the experience about making games is that by making them yourself.
Just
So
like
the more you can
anywhere else.
demonstrate that exactly, the more you can demonstrate that you've been making games, the more it becomes easier for you to get into the industry.
Yeah. To write a book, you need to write a book.
Exactly. So you can't write a book without reading some, right? And you need to write one eventually to get that out. You can't tell people like, "Hey, I'm a publisher. I've read a lot of books, so give me money and I will write the book for you."
Yeah.
You know, no publisher would accept that.
Let's talk a bit about game design in particular.
Hmm.
Like we've never talked to a game designer before in this series,
Okay.
so it would be really nice to hear something about that aspect of game, one of the more important aspects of game development.
Uh-huh.
You've worked both on AAA titles and on some mobile games.
Yeah.
What would be the main differences in regards to game design? I mean, like on like on general level, like we're making a casual game, we should focus on these, or we're making a AAA title, we should focus on these.
Yeah. So from a pure game design perspective, so like I made mobile, I made Flash games, I made Facebook games,
Yeah,
I made even like back in the day mobile J2ME games. The scale of the game will differ greatly, right? Even like in AAA games, like games that I made 10 years ago, where a team size is much different than
yeah,
game teams nowadays, right? Um, the principles of the psychology of the player, how to get the player engaged, how to teach aspects of gameplay to the player, what game design means, how do game designers get inspiration and ideas, how do you instill those ideas, how do you create mechanics and all of that. That doesn't change, not even across the console. It's the same kind of principles that apply to board games, chess, even sports.
yeah.
Any idea of acts of play will involve the same theoretical game design principles. So like even when you read game design books in general, like there's fantastic books out there. One of my favorites is Jesse Shell's book, The Art of Game Design, Book of Lenses. A lot of the example Jesse uses in his books is around chess and checkers and Monopoly and like board games, and then blows them up to MMOs. The principles apply. The scale and the number of mechanics and features and the complexity of how these systems are, that is the thing that gets different. But the theoretical aspect of game design and the theory of fun, so to say, um, is roughly the same.
You've said that theoretically, even like the ways you teach players to play, like the tutorials are the same, like
Hmm.
on the principle level. But from my like experience as a gamer, I
Yeah,
I cannot put it in words correctly, but there is some major differences in the way I think mobile games teach you to play and classical titles teach
yeah,
you to play. Like if we compare, the strict tutorial when the mobile games tells you to tap only here,
yeah,
to something like Half-Life 2 when the
yeah.
guard throws the can on the ground.
Yeah. Well, because the circumstances around the two games are quite different. So, for example, in a mobile game, there's a smaller level of investment. If it's most probably free, you did not pay much for it. There's a lot of competition on mobile. Most of the time, when you're choosing to play a mobile game, you're like, waiting for something. Or have some little time to kill, so like you have a little time investment.
Yeah,
So you basically your attention span is quite limited. So like I'm gonna check this out. If it doesn't impress me within the first 2 minutes, I'm out. I'll just delete it and find something else because there's a very small barrier of entry.
yeah,
Whereas in a console game or traditional game, let's say, you're paying between 60 to 70 gigs, 70 euro, 60 euros to pay for the game, or dollars, or whatever your currency is as you're listening. So you paid a good sum of money to
yeah,
get that game. If you downloaded it, you're invested an amount of time to download the initial package, which is now quite significant. If you're playing it on console or PC, you've already invested quite a bit in the console itself or in the machine. So you already have a lot of money invested. So by the time you plug in this game, your mindset is that I want to sit down and dedicate my entire attention to this thing because I put a lot of money into it, and I'm gonna give it an hour or two, some even
yeah,
more, to see if I like it or not. That is a luxury that mobile designers don't have. So that's why their approach is quite different. In a traditional game, they assume that your attention is there. So like, I'm gonna give this guy 15 lines of text to read, and they're gonna read it because they have no other option. In mobile design, for example, they're like, I don't have that luxury. So how can I make sure that that person understands what I'm trying to convey in the best way? And eventually, you will see traditional gaming applying that similar kind of technique in tutorials in their games as well. So like most solid tutorials, even traditional games, they're the ones that you get it. You get what's going on without a lot of understanding, or having to open stuff or read online, or like going to YouTube to understand what's going on. These are things that will drastically go away and then come back to becoming a lot more explained in the game.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot less barrier for entry. And I'll give you an example, even in traditional games, to maybe get this closer to you. Back when you could only afford one game a month, in the traditional, like when the games were also, there wasn't that much choice as well, even though there was a lot of competition. Even if you don't understand the game, you go ask the kids in class, you go buy magazines. There's so much investment because I really need to like this thing.
Yeah.
And now you hear a lot of like how modern games are more hand-holdy. It's because there's a lot of competition out there, and if they don't explain what they're trying to do, they will lose you as a player. So they're going to be able to. They need to be improving their tutorials and how they onboard players in general.
To your point about going around and asking people and reading, I once, when I don't remember the year, but when Kane and Lynch 2 came out, maybe you remember,
I do.
I really enjoyed the first game, but I didn't like the second one that much. But then I convinced myself I enjoyed it because I paid money for it.
Yeah, I remember back in the day, like when Final Fantasy VII came out, which is like one of my favorite games. When I first looked at the game, I was like, "What is this? Why do all the characters look so blocky?"
Yeah.
And I just have to read a lot of text, and like it wasn't like really into like there was a lot of people at the time that never played RPGs, and they're like, this person is where they are, they can't move. What is this?" And then a lot of people kind of like invested because I paid so much money. Everybody's saying it's great, it has to be good, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
invest in it. And you can see like how with the modern remake, like a lot of the things that were left to imagination or the complaints that we had about the original game, is kind of being ironed out and replaced with modern
Yeah.
design standards.
I actually wanted to ask you something about remakes, if you brought this up.
Yeah, sure.
Why do you think the trend is so, like, not only remakes, remasters, I don't know, yeah, remakes, remasters? Is it just the players being nostalgic and like the companies know that people would love this because the average gamer is getting older every year?
Yeah, yeah.
Or is there
So
something else?
there's a bit more to it. So like I definitely think nostalgia is a strong factor. We can see that in a lot of reboots and even in movies, in which like like there's a new Lion King now, for example. Like, yeah, I love that movie as a kid. It would be great to watch it again as an
Yeah.
adult. So nostalgia is a very strong thing. But there's also, you got to keep in mind that there's generations of gamers that grew up with our current internet culture, and they're like familiar with a lot of the stuff that we take as standard for gamer culture that they've never got the chance to experience themselves, and
Yeah.
did want to get the experience that myself. So like right now, for example, as we were talking about Final Fantasy, I'm seeing so many people on my Twitter or on my Facebook groups that are younger designers that have never really played the original, but know a lot about it. It's hard to be on the internet without getting spoiled about Final Fantasy, really. And now they're getting the opportunity to experience that for the first time. So some of them is like, I want to see what the fuss is all about. Similar when like Shadow of the Colossus came out, the
Yeah.
remake came out on PlayStation 4 a couple of years ago. uh, for the people that played it at the time, it's like a bona fide classic. But not everybody got the chance to experience it proper, right? So like it gives a new generation of people to experience it. Another way is that like there are games that are super close to me and dear to my heart, that I used to enjoy quite a bit. That now I'm not gonna like go and find a CRT TV and hook up my old Super Nintendo or PlayStation to
Yeah.
that thing and try to see if the CD is working, and then play with a cord, with a corded controller, and like look to find if they still have a memory card somewhere, just to enjoy like a Metal Gear
Yeah.
or a Golden Eye or these experiences, right? Like they were great for their time, but I still want to enjoy them now. And oftentimes, I remember like earlier, they used to release the PlayStation Classics on PlayStation, and some of these games did not really hold up as we remember that they are. So the HD remakes, the remakes or the HD revamps, they just bringing those classic experiences to our standard today. So we play them as we remember them, but it's not exactly how they were, and I think
Yeah.
that's great. I mean, like, think about how many people like know that Ocarina of Time is one of the best games ever made, but they've never had a Nintendo 64, right?
Yeah.
And they got the opportunity to play
I
it
am
again
one
on
of
the
them.
3DS. So now you can play it on the 3DS, for example.
Yeah.
So you got the opportunity to see what the fuss is all about. Or like all of these people that heard about how great Resident Evil 2 is, but like I can't do tank controls. They're just too much for me.
Yeah.
And now they got the opportunity to experience it again. So it's obviously like the objective of any business and any enterprise is to make money,
Yeah, of course.
but it's also is to satisfy a customer need. And there's clearly customers that want this stuff, myself included.
That is true. That is
Yeah,
true. I just saw a lot of, you know, like people getting angry, like, where are the new titles? We want something new. And that's why I wanted to ask you this.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
I was up till midnight last night because I wanted to wait until Final Fantasy VII unlocks so I can get to play it. I played the original like 8 times, if not
yeah.
more. So like,
You didn't
I'm
really need
definitely
to do that, but
I'm definitely in the target group for people who want to play remakes and remasters and that kind of stuff.
uh, can I ask you something about how you personally, when you're working on a game, like how do you and your team come up with this is a broad question, but how do you come
Mm,
up with new gaming ideas?
yeah,
Like you're in a room and
yeah,
I don't know, you're throwing a concept at the wall. Like how's it
yeah.
happening?
So there are. So it's very important for us and this is also something I teach quite a bit to my students too. Um, it's very important for us to understand the concept of inspiration.
Yeah,
So inspiration always comes from personal experience. Personal experience can be what we consume as pop culture. So like the media, the music that we hear, the movies that we watch, the comic books that we endeavor. And if you notice that a lot of the game developers, they probably have a lot of similar sources of inspirations amongst each other, which is why a lot of the game ideas sometimes come up like that. I don't know a single game designer that didn't at one point in their career go like, oh, I had this great game idea, and then PUBG came out, and it
yeah,
was exactly the same idea. And PUBG is inspired by a series of books, like the battle royale books to some extent that came out around that game concept. That is also inspired by other things. So. Inspiration is always coming in from additional things that you've seen. Like even an artist, when they like, create this very imaginative character, most probably that character is inspired by a bunch of real life characters that we see that are mixed together or deformed of that, or a humanoid cockroach or a humanoid fish or something like that. So like there is a root in reality
yeah,
to every fantasy. There's nothing that comes out of nowhere. Identifying where inspiration comes from is the essence of creativity. So when you realize that your inspiration sources is not only limited but is shared, then you'll get a lot of similar ideas coming out. The best way to kind of make them more unique is to make them closer to you. So your perspective on topics that other people can think of is what makes ideas unique and original. Your personal experiences that you've had from your perspective will create more originality and uniqueness into your ideas. Um, Miyamoto famously used to go out, run around Kyoto as a child, and used to look down pipes on the sides of buildings and used to think, I wonder what the other side is going to be like. If I go into that pipe, on the other side, I might come out in a different world entirely. And obviously that made its way to Mario eventually.
yeah,
And Miyamoto himself as well used to go out like in the rice fields and like a bit of the countryside around Kyoto, and he used to imagine himself as a kid as this explorer that cuts through grass and explores these vast fields, and there's like an entire world out there. There's a sense of wonder that he had as a kid, and that ended up becoming The Legend of Zelda. So there's a lot of these like inspirations, identifying what these are as you're going through them, and then going like, oh, there's a captivating experience, and there's a sense of wonder that is propelling me to think about this more. Is the essence of inspiration, and that's how ideas come from. So that's when like usually when I work with my teams, they want to come up with originality. I urge them to think that way.
yeah,
Oftentimes, ideas also come from solving problems. So we go like our players, and they played the previous iteration of this game. They had these problems. How can we solve them? Coming up with solutions is something that every game designer enjoys quite a bit. We're all problem solvers. So sometimes it's not necessarily the ideas that matters, it's identifying where the problem is and then coming up with solutions is what matters the most. Something I tell my designers also quite frequently is that as a game designer, this is a common misconception that your job is to come up with ideas. But in fact, our job is to make other people's ideas work.
Can you? So who comes with ideas then?
It can come from anywhere. So like you could read a comment on a YouTube video if somebody goes like, oh man, it would be great if that weapon did this.
Yeah.
And you go like, that's a good idea. But if we did this, that might screw the balance in some other ways. But we can do it if we did this, this, and that. And all of a sudden that idea makes its way to the game. Or like, some person in art go like, oh, I really want to do this and make this part of the game a little bit more shiny. But like, yeah, if that's shiny, it's actually just going to become more clear to the player that they need to click on it. But it would look weird. But maybe if we did this and that on this other side of the game, then that will fit in. So we identified that the idea exists, we identified the potential of the idea, and then we identified all the problems or domino effect that that idea might happen. And then we solve these issues to fit that idea in. That's a game designer's job.
That is a good explanation. I think we can cut it out and put somewhere. On a related topic, I'm sure like it happened, but maybe you can give us an example. When you're working on a game mechanic, and when you're thinking, wow, this is gonna be amazing, this is gonna be so fun, and then you implemented it and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
What is the main criteria to like identify it was fun to develop it, it was great thinking about it, we need to cut it out?
Yeah, so what I urge the team always is that we need to always prototype those ideas that we're uncertain of before we build them. So going straight into building things is when we get those unpleasant surprises like, we thought that idea was great, but oh my God, it's not working at all. And we are in the middle of development and we don't have time and resources and now everything's on fire. So we want to avoid the circumstances as much as possible by trying to prototype that idea as early as possible. So when I work with development team, and I just did, recently I did a talk about effective prototyping. We need to identify what are the things we need to prototype. How do we make sure that we get the quick and dirty way to identify if this thing works or not? And if it doesn't work, it's okay, it's fine. Failure is a good result coming out of this, so we can scrap it and come up with something else. So my solution is that we always prototype. And we never fall in love with our own ideas so that they make their way into development without being able to validate them. And if something is not working, we should definitely cut it. Regardless of how much time and investment. So like I don't believe in sunken cost fallacies. So if we invested a lot of time in it, but it's not working for the benefit of the game, that thing has to go. And we need to cut it off entirely.
And I actually had a question about, the just like in cinema, as I asked before, there is often, well, not often, I can count the cases on my one hand, but there are some times when like games are viewed as auteur cinema, like a game by Sam Lake or a game by Neil Druckmann or Kojima, and the Russian players, they proclaimed him a genius. So sometime before, when if you went to Kojima's Twitter account, there were like people were writing like genius in Russian. So do you think it's valid? What I wanted to ask is it valid to give one person so much credit for game development, considering teams are now like in thousands of people?
Yeah.
Even more so than a movie with the director.
I think there's two facets to this. So like proclaiming that one person is responsible for shipping an entire game is, as you probably already deducted, is absolutely ridiculous. And even if you ask those guys, the creative directors, and if you actually read their tweets, they're often thanking their teams for their work and effort. It's a group activity for sure. And it's a group effort, and like a successful game for the most part needs to come out of a group of people's working together. And with the sizes like bigger size games, there's no way that one person will know every single detail about how every tiny aspect of the game is being developed at the same time. There's just too much going on for one person to be able to keep track of all of that together. However, um, there is always within game the aspect of a vision holder. And in a lot of game companies, there will be a creative director person who is in charge of rallying the team around a vision. So while that person can come up with that vision themselves, or be able to extract the vision out of their team and then guiding them towards that, or just get a business briefing and turn that into a vision. There are many ways in which a vision can come to life. There are usually one or more people on a game project that are rallying people around a unified vision. Because when game projects expand in size, there'll be a lot more people, and with a lot more people, there'll be a lot more opinions.
Yeah.
And sometimes there'll be two decisions that sound just as good. And it'll be hard to move forward without somebody going like, we're going this way instead of that way. And that's where creative directors really come into place. They rally the team around the vision. So saying that Kojima shipped his game on his own is obviously ridiculous. But saying that Kojima was not responsible for some of the vision of his creations is also ridiculous. They're both together. He is, by all definitions, amongst the main reasons why the creative output of his studio has a very similar taste and tone and feel and all of that. He also collaborates with a lot of the same people, so that helps a lot with their creation. But also, like, his leadership and his ability to guide those people to create these kind of senses and tones and all of that is something that we need to appreciate too. So, but also hailing him as the only hero that shipped the games is also not reasonable. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of people that are involved with this game, and they all contributed in making this an amazing game as well. So, um, my answer is not binary in this.
Yeah.
Because I do think that it's people like to, because it's cool to get that one superhero figure, because that's how we're used to in like the dramatization of any kind of fiction. But the reality is that there's always heroes that do amazing things that are part of the creation, and in the movie business is just the same, right? So Tarantino would have a very specific style and direction that's
Yeah.
clearly his vision, but he also works with an amazing cast, incredible musicians, incredible cinematographers that he collaborates with quite frequently to get that signature style. He sure might have set the style himself, but those individuals also contribute. So we recognize him and also recognize others at the same time. This is why in the Oscars there's a best director, there's a best picture, and there's also a best cinematographer, right?
And we have something like that with BAFTA, and yeah.
Exactly. So even in the games industry, we acknowledge that multiple people are involved with the gaming creations. And even when somebody is accepting an award for a project, what is the first thing they always say? I'd like to thank the team, right? I wish I could bring my entire team on stage. In some cases, that's impossible. That's what people would say as well. But it is the reality. They could not have made the game without the team, and the team needed that vision to be rallied around. So.
Um, yeah. I was just trying to find out who's the vision holder. You kind of explained that.
Yeah, it will be usually the creative director of the project, and that person could be a designer, but also could come from anywhere.
Um, One of the last serious questions I had, considering we're hitting the hour. Do you have like 10 more minutes?
Sure,
Okay, thank you.
no problem.
In the recent years, there were a lot of games with what I would call non-professional, I don't know, but non-traditional gameplay loops. Like what I mean is games like walking simulators. They were not a thing like 15 years ago. You know, you kind of needed,
Yeah,
if you came up 15 years ago with a walking simulator, people would be like, yeah, but where's the game? And nowadays it's kind of okay to make a game without a gameplay loop. First of all, do you enjoy playing games like this? And second, do do you think there are other like unique genres that are still kind of untamed and something else will come up?
So, so the answer to the first one, do I enjoy playing these kinds of games? Yes, I enjoy playing any kind of video game, and I enjoy really the notion of game developers that are challenging or expanding the notion of what a video game is supposed to be. And we've seen throughout the years is that there's been a lot of people pushing the envelope about what a game should be, and therefore, that they brought in so much more fun and excitement and new genres to the gaming experience. I remember there was a period back in the day that games are not supposed to be scary, or games were not supposed to be about stories, right? People used to say, "I want the game to just. If I want to watch a story, I'd watch a movie." You don't hear that anymore because
Yeah,
uh, gaming as a medium has the ability to deliver emotions and experiences in a way that other mediums just cannot. And the walking simulators, as you described them, those are gameplay experiences that are delivering storytelling in a way that you could not consume in any other way, hands down.
yeah,
And they were very successful at achieving what they wanted to achieve. And I'm confident that there will be more and more new types of games that we are yet to imagine. And that's the beauty of it. We are only bounded by our imagination and inspiration and the new different perspectives that are going to come from different parts of the world to amaze us and excite us. So there will be things coming out at any time. So I can give you like a recent example.
yeah.
Um, there was a mod in Dota, which Dota is originally a mod to begin with. A
Warcraft
mod
3.
exactly that created. That was even before that. It was a mod on StarCraft before it moved into Warcraft 3 and became Dota as we know it. That started an entire new genre that came out of the blue, and that's a genre that's been going strong for over a decade at this point. Now within Dota, there was I think last year too, and maybe at the later part of the year before that, there was a mod that came out that's called Auto Chess, uh, which has now become a genre, and there are many games that are out there to play it. It's basically a lot of it is you making choices, but the game plays itself.
Yeah,
And that challenges a lot of what people would say is traditionally a game because there's a lot of things that are happening automatically and you're just making decisions. But there's so much depth, and that mode
yeah.
of play is purely popular and created a new genre, came out of nowhere as well. So Minecraft was one of those games as well, right?
That is true.
Who would have thought that? So Minecraft challenged that the traditional expectation of a game to have a start and an end, to give you a set of objectives, and to tell you like what you need to do one step at a time. Minecraft completely threw that out the window.
And have good
And
graphics.
oh, also that, right? Like in the time that it's come, like people go like, I want everything to be HD and like
Yeah,
I wanna count the gigahertz and like all that stuff and how many teraflops is that machine capable of running and Minecraft just threw all of that out the window and go like, here's the most popular game in the world right now that doesn't adhere to anything that we would deem traditional.
yeah. You've mentioned modes, and I want to ask you this. Uh, like, for example, why am I starting a question like this? So the modding community, it used to be more prevalent in a lot of games, but in the last couple of years, what we see is it's like there is less room for modders. For example, CS and CS always had and Half-Life a huge modding
Mhm.
community. The recent Riot Games game Valorant is very similar in some ways to CS, but there will be no modding community around it.
Yeah.
How crucial do you think are modders to kind of pushing the industry further, adding new ideas?
Yeah, I think back in the day as well, modders was one of the fewer ways to come up with new ideas because it's basically it's the democratization of game making.
Yeah.
It's not just the developer that makes games now. It's everybody can be a developer through the set of tools that are going in. So it's kind of sad that developers are moving away from modding in some ways. But I can understand that because modern technology is in its own moving away from a lot of the tools that allow modders to work in the way they want to work, right? And there's also all sorts of copyright concerns and people, using modding for in wrong ways, let's say, that are delivering negative experiences to other players. So there is a downside of modding that is unfortunately one of the reasons why, communities are becoming a little bit more careful towards. But it's kind of sad that we're moving away from that. However, we are more focused on user-generated content than ever before. And a lot of games are giving tools for the users to be able to create their own experiences than we've ever seen in game development before. We mentioned Minecraft, for example, that allows a lot of creativity. Mario Maker, for example, a series. Or even like the recently released Dreams on PlayStation. It's
Yeah.
basically a game engine that is packaged as a game, and you can make your own stuff, right? And so there's a huge push towards user-generated content in games that is still allowing people to create within the concept of a game, but at the same time allow the developers to have some kind of moderation on the content to make sure people are having a good experience. The other aspect is that there will be a bit more the tools that we use to make games nowadays are a lot more easily accessible. So like back in the day, having your hands on a game engine was almost impossible for an individual. There were very expensive pieces of software that you needed a license to even use.
Yeah.
And now you can just download Unreal or Unity for free, basically, on the learner's process. There's so much information out there on the internet to get you started, and it is relatively easier to make a video game than ever before. So while modding might be taking a back step in some cases, user-generated content and game engines are replacing that factor, in which like maybe you cannot adjust that game as much as you used to want to do, but now you can make your own.
Yeah.
And you can make your own, and you can rival those games as well. And we've seen what PUBG did; it disrupted the entire industry, and it came out.
For a
And
while,
that
yeah.
and that came from a mod as well that eventually became its own game, and it's challenged, some of the bigger shooter games out there in the market.
And now every game has a battle royale.
Or a twist on it to some extent.
Yeah.
And you could say, like, why do people do this all the time? And I want to just make a comment on this. I remember a time when every first-person shooter was called the Doom clone. Do you remember
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So imagine that we used to bastardize an entire genre because they looked similar to a game. The essence of game development is iteration. So basically, you pick up something and go like, I can make this better by doing other things on it. People mistakenly call that copying or stealing or something like that. But we are an iterative industry. If it wasn't for Doom, there wouldn't have been a Fortnite or a PUBG, right? But if we also criminalized games by calling them always a Doom clone, then we would have never have evolved first-person shooter to this extent, right?
Yeah.
So like calling a game like The Witness a Doom clone is ridiculous. But it is a first-person game, right?
Yeah. I agree with that.
So
Back
to
in the
say that Apex Legends is the same as Fortnite, I don't think is true at all.
that is true. I mean, I agree with you. Yeah, back I remember every open world third person action was like a GTA clone. Nowadays, I
Mhm.
don't see that happen anymore.
Yeah. And when GTA came out, people go like, oh, they're trying to copy Shinmu.
Yeah.
Right? And now you look at it historically, you're like, no, those two games can't be similar in
Yeah.
any way. They might have paved the way for some of these interactions to come into place and these gameplay elements to become a thing. But that's how iteration works, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, rapid fire round, and then that's it. Just quick
Okay.
questions, and yeah. Um, top three games of all time for you, like personal.
Ooh. Super Street Fighter 2.
Okay.
Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, StarCraft: Brood Wars.
Okay. Best video game story of the last decade.
Of the last decade,
Yeah.
the last 10 years. To the Moon.
Oh, I love that one. Oh,
I love
it's
that
so,
game.
so sad.
It's amazing game. Beautiful story.
Yeah. Bad Company 2 or Battlefield 4?
Oh, that's tough. That's tough. Um, what I told my team is that my favorite battlefield is Battlefield Vietnam, actually.
Oh, I haven't played that one.
That's a really good time. I have very fond memories playing that game.
Okay,
Bad
that
Company
counts.
2 is great, and Battlefield 4 is great for different reasons. I love both. I can't choose.
PS or Xbox?
PS.
PS.
I like. I have very fond memories of my first PlayStation, so I was always playing a lot of PlayStation games. But I use Xbox a lot as well, so it's
Yeah.
difficult to answer that. But yeah, I'm a PlayStation guy, I think.
As a gamer,
Mm.
single player or multiplayer?
Oof, I like both.
Come
Even in
on,
my top
you
three,
need to
my top three games
something.
that my top three games that I told you just now, there were two of them was multiplayer, and one of them was single player.
That would
Um,
be the answer.
that would be the answer. I'd say like I think back in the day when I used to be able to invest a lot of time into multiplayer, but I still do actually. Yeah, two multiplayer, one single player. Let's place it that way.
Okay.
I like both, man. It's really tricky. I enjoy both.
What is your ideal weekend?
Ideal weekend. Catching up with friends, playing video games, waking up late, going out and have fun, socialize. In this time of Corona, I miss that a lot. Yeah, being around friends and family, uh, playing video games. Yeah, a good meal, some beer.
You've mentioned a lot of things.
Well, that's most like my weekends usually consist of a lot of things. Like you can sit with family or friends, have beer, and play a video game together, right?
Yeah.
So I can do all of that in an hour, and then I get so drunk that I wake up very late the next day. So there you go.
Can you recommend some professional resources that you read about the industry or game design in particular? Like maybe there's some websites that you enjoy reading?
So like I go to the usual, so like Gamma Sutra, Games Industry Biz. I go to those quite frequently for game industry stuff.
Yeah.
GDC Talks is highly recommend those for everybody. They offer a lot of their videos for free on YouTube, but you can also check them out if you have the GDC Vault access. And yeah, books. I recommend Jesse Schell's book, The Art of Game Design, Ralph Koster's book, Theory of Fun, and Eric Zimmerman's book, Rules of Play. Fantastic books. Fantastic
Okay.
people as well, by the way. Really awesome, awesome human beings.
We'll put them on our list to
Yeah, great
try
books,
and
great
talk to.
people. Yeah, great people.
Well, this is it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. That was fun.